whoa, that's a lot of money. How many hours are you putting into it? And like, do you want the result or not? You know what I can do? The hours I put into it are not relevant to me. So why do you care?
People are taking hard stances on the side of either remote or in-person work. Where do you stand on the debate?
I really try to take a neutral stance. I am someone who has worked at home for himself forever. Like, I had one office job once. It was ridiculous. I worked there for like a month in the first year of university. My job was like copy boy. And I would sit in a windowless room in an office in downtown Toronto, just making copies of it, like dentist's newsletters for hours a day, until the day when the smell of toner was like stuck to me. And then I smelled something and it wasn't toner, it was smoke. I literally lit a Canon copier on fire from overuse. Like the repair guy came in and he's like, God damn, what did you do here? So that's my experience of working in office. So I haven't done it since. And I fully appreciate all the advantages and joys of like being able to sit here in your sweatpants or your sweatshirt in today's case and not have to deal with that. But I also see that it's not a zero-sum thing, and that there are tremendous advantages or unseen benefits, let's say, of going to work in a room or a building with other people, whether for meetings or a work trip or for periods of time, right? There is no substitute for that human relationship. Yes, we can have this conversation here and it's great and it works and Nick's a little pixelated, but I still sort of get the gist of his facial expressions. But if we were to be sitting around a table and having this conversation, it would be in a fidelity much more different. And then we could go out and joke around and go for lunch and we would build a much deeper relationship, right? There is something that one of the people I interviewed for the book, Andreas Hofbauer, he worked with architects a lot in architecture offices in New York and studios. And he said, there's something called embodied cognition. And what is that? That's like you walk around the office day in, day out. I bump into Nick at the elevator. I see Matt by the coffee machine. I walk by your desk. I see like a sketch or a thing you're working on. And over time, that builds an understanding of something that's far deeper. The rhythms, the language, the sights and sounds and textures of something that ends up being a project. So that when you start talking about the new entryway of a building you're designing, I already have an understanding of what that is and how it fits into my piece of the project. You don't have to bring me up to speed on it with a bunch of stupid PDFs that you're sending me. Like everything, there's so much more to this world than just the information that can be digitized and transferred through a screen or through headphones. And we possibly undervalue that. So I think for a lot of people, there's value in that. Does that mean that everybody has to go back 5 days a week, 9 to 5 to a central office in a centralized downtown? No, of course not. I think what people really want, and this is just my guess, is like, they want those good parts. They want the advantages and they want to minimize the bad parts. And there are certainly a lot of bad parts to, working in one space. But I think also people want a degree of like adult autonomy where it's like, why do I have to be sitting at this particular desk at 9 o'clock until 5 o'clock? I have to pick up my kids at 5:15. Like, can I leave a little earlier? People just want a bit of that flexibility, but also know like when it's an important thing and it makes sense for everyone to come together, then you're going to do it. Right. And so I think everyone is figuring that out. There's no one answer. It's different for every individual. It's different for every company and organization and industry. But I think those who have said we are fully remote, we are never going to go back, that there's a cost to that that's going to accrue and reveal itself over time. And I think in the same way of the ones that are like everybody back in the office 5 days a week, like, 9 to 5 and we're clocking you in. There's a cost to that too. It's a question of sort of rethinking the notion of like productivity, right? Which is a much bigger, stickier subject.
Yeah, I totally agree that balance is better in this area. And there are times when people say, this meeting could have been an email, but then on the flip side, these 50 Slack messages could have been a 3-minute conversation. So,
yeah,
what's going to lead to more productivity? And you point out in the book, workplace technology hasn't made us any more productive. It's made us work more, but not necessarily better. So
right.
What has to shift to change this to a more efficient workforce?
Well, and that's it. Like we are confusing. This is the wrong question that we keep asking, which is obvious. Like it makes sense why we're asking it. Is like, how much work do we do from home and how much do we do from the office? You know, what days do I go in and what days am I here? Right. And the bigger question we have to answer, and I think if we do answer that, we'll be able to solve the first question a lot easier, is like, what does it mean to be productive at work? Right. If I'm an employee of Superkick Branding, and I don't know how many people you have working for you.
It's just us.
Perfect.
Totally flexible workplace.
If I am one of two employees okay, great. So Matt and Nick working together. What is productivity? Like if Nick takes an afternoon off, but he's done his part of the project, that's the main project you're working on, he's going to go, I don't know, golf, or I don't know what you do for fun, Nick. Go to a rodeo or whatever one does in Houston. Is that like, well, you weren't productive today. You didn't put in the hours. You probably don't operate like that because that's not the kind of business, two people are running a business. But if you're at a company, it's a different thing. So it's like, what is the measure of productivity? Is the measure of productivity someone's time? In a certain business or a certain type of operation, it probably will be, right? Taxi driver. But in other cases, it's project based. And I as a writer, I sometimes get asked to do like consulting projects or some other thing. And someone's like, well, what do you charge per hour? And I'm like, I don't charge per hour. They're like, but how do I charge you per hour? I'm like, I don't charge per hour. Like that's not my gauge of productivity. Like, I'm going to do this project for you and here's how much it's going to cost. I'm like, whoa, that's a lot of money. How many hours are you putting into it? And like, do you want the result or not? You know what I can do? The hours I put into it are not relevant to me. So why do you care? Like, if you want me to do the hours, I'm going to take this number and divide it by a certain number of hours and then just lie. And like, if I'm working fewer hours on it, I'll make sure that like, I'll take the last part of the project and stretch it over the hours. Like, who cares? But we're still stuck in this industrial revolution sort of mentality around it. And the problem with, digital technology, it's so focused on streamlining and a certain degree of efficiency and a mechanized way of doing things that we're still stuck into this. So now we're getting the flip side of this, which is like big corporations are putting in keyboard spyware where it's like, we're going to track the keystrokes you've done in order to measure how much you're working from home, because we can't have a manager standing over your shoulder watching how much you're working versus like joking with Nick about the baseball game last night, right? At the office. And we'll be like, oh, he's back to work. Like either of those are a model of inefficiency, whether one's digital or one's analog and in person, that belies a much bigger question about the future of work. So I think all those questions about the future of work, we're kind of barking up the wrong tree, looking at it from sort of this question of location. I think people are going to sort that out. Whatever's going to work for them, fine. If they can make it work one way or another. But I think those bigger questions are the ones that we really have to dig into.
How willing is a company to allow their employees to own or be in control of their time, be in control of their method of how they handle their job? Because it's like, I thought you brought up some good points in the book about you need your environment to spark ideas. You need these sights, sounds, smells, but like also like, I don't need it every day either, though.
I only need them from 9 a.m. till 5 p.m.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like, as an employer, I can see the struggle. It's like, I want to make sure people are productive, but how much control should I really be giving to my employees? And it's also like, how much do I trust their maturity level? Are these people disciplined? Will they handle their business, or do I have to treat them like a child? And, so it's an interesting dilemma that people are in, because I think it's a personal thing. I think, for me, like Matt's worked with me for a while. So my style is more like, I trust you, you're grown, you can handle your business. Now, however, other people are more like controlling. Like, I got to put these buttons in your keyboard to understand exactly what you're doing, because if I'm not in control, I won't feel like you're being productive.
Yeah, and that's a much bigger, more complicated, more human, ultimately, task to build the future work. And that scares people. And so it's a lot easier to say, hey, 4 days a week in, 1 day a week off. These are your flex days, and we have this software. Like we're the company of the future now. And when you come in, we're gonna have these cool pods that Herman Miller designed or whatever. But we're still counting your goddamn keystrokes and hours. I think that's it. Like people love that simplistic view of the future, and technology digital can provide that. But it's very limited. And if we see the future through that lens, we're limiting ourselves too.